We need all countries to do more. As we look at what the science is saying, we are not going to make it with what current NDCs are. With that said, you do see a couple countries that are pushing the envelope. Some of these countries come out and be more ambitious, others will follow. Because climate change is one of those things that nobody wants to reduce their emissions, knowing that other countries aren't doing the same thing. And so as you start to see more countries do it, they start to walk together and build trust. Going to see in Glasgow is we're going to see some countries come forward with a new emission reduction target. Some countries will also basically provide further clarity on their target. Instead of just saying, we're going to reduce our emissions by 50%, well, now we're going to need to see how and what is the plan behind how you're going to do this. We want to see all emissions and all reductions possible in an NDC, meaning that we know if a country only includes its emissions from transportation, well, what about your forests? What about your energy creation are you using coal? You need to include all of these sinks and all of these sources. The other thing is depth. What is your number? Are you actually going to reduce emissions as much as you possibly can? And this is where the tricky part comes in, because many politicians don't want to put a number forward that they don't think they can meet. But how do we get a country to come forward with enough ambition that they're kind of putting themselves out there a little bit? In Copenhagen, in 2009, there was an agreement that $100 billion per year by 2020 should be delivered or mobilized by public and private sources to the developing world. And what we're seeing, and that was supposed to be by 2020. 2020 is obviously past us. It's time for a new pledge. We need it to be larger and we need it to be more inclusive. All of these really important pieces of climate change and the work we need to do on the ground need more finance. But we need to figure out how to most effectively allocate it so it gets to the places that it possibly can. I think one of the most interesting things that we're going to be watching for at this COP is going to be what the private sector does. But what is the private sector doing is also going to change what is going on in climate change. If we are putting out climate targets, but the way our economy is working is not kind of meshing up with what the rest of us are saying we want to do in climate, we're not actually doing it. So how do we build trust between private sector, between those of us that are consumers that need to reduce our own emissions, and government so that it all comes together? What are these biggest major economies going to come and deliver so that they're showing the rest of the world that they're going to lead from out front? With that, it needs to include more finance for the developing world. It needs to include more emission reductions and more ambition from everybody. These pieces will all start to get together. And then we need to see how the private sector and the public sector are going to work together. If the private sector is working on its own, the public sector is working on its own, how are we as individuals going to be able to input our own opinion and our own work into this bigger framework? I think we're going to need to look at the overall. There's an inside the COP game going on, and there's an outside the COP. Inside the COP, you have countries doing negotiations. What are the rules? What funding numbers have to move this way or that way? Outside of the COP, you're seeing corporations, you're seeing broader governments put forward pledges, and how do we make all of this work together? And then there's two sides of the coin that I think we need to look at. One is finance, how much money can move to help countries implement their NDCs, and the other side of the coin is ambition. Because without finance, there's not going to be ambition. But then also without ambition and without transparency, the finance often doesn't flow because most finance needs metrics to figure out that it's going to the right places, that it's being utilized well. So in a way, all of this different construct builds itself around trust again. And how do we trust that these emissions are going down, that this finance is going up, and that we're all working on this together?